I don't know what hurt worse, the stabbing ache in my chest or the silence of my own son, as his wife turned my hospital bed into a bargaining table. The machines around me sang their cold song, beeping in steady rhythm, reminding me with every sound that my body was fragile, that I was no longer the man who once stood tall on his own land. The smell of disinfectant clung to the air, sharp, unnatural, and yet the only thing more suffocating was her voice, measured, sweetened with false concern, but dripping with something darker. She sat by my side with a stack of papers, each one demanding my name, my signature, my surrender, and I lay there, weak, tubes in my arms, breath thin and shallow, as she smiled like a banker closing in on a deal. People think betrayal comes loud, with shouting, with slammed doors and broken glass, but no, sometimes it comes soft, dressed as kindness, whispering that it's for your own good. Sometimes betrayal walks in with a clipboard and leaves with everything you ever worked for. And when you're too sick to fight, when your body trembles at the thought of standing, you realize how easy it is for others to write the final chapter of your life while you're still breathing. I closed my eyes that night, not to rest, but to hold in the tears. I could not let her see me break. My name is Edward. I'm 72 years old, and I have lived all my life in a small town in the American Midwest. I am a widower. My wife, Margaret, passed away years ago, leaving me with memories that still wake me in the night. I raised my son, Daniel, with hands that were rough from labor but always open for him. I thought love would be enough to teach him loyalty, but life has a cruel way of showing you otherwise. Somewhere along the way, he slipped into a silence that hurts more than any word could. And his wife, Claire, fills that silence with her own voice, smooth, convincing, but sharper than any blade. As I lay in that hospital room, with the fluorescent lights humming and my heartbeat echoing through the monitor, I realized I was no longer just a patient. I was prey. Every paper she pushed toward me carried the weight of my home, my savings, my name. I wanted to shout, to rise, to remind them that I was still their father, still the man who built a life from nothing. But my body betrayed me, and only my mind remained my weapon. I pretended to sleep as she spoke of efficiency, of making things easier for everyone. But inside, I made a promise. If she was turning this ICU into a deal table, then I would make it into something else, a courtroom. And in that courtroom, I would not be the accused. I would be the judge. And so, with the faint hum of the machines around me, I began to plan the fight of my life. After Margaret passed, the house grew unbearably large. Every room echoed with absence, the clatter of dishes for one, the empty chair across from mine, the silence at night where her laugh once softened the dark. Loneliness does strange things to a man. It does not kill him outright. It wears him down like a steady drip of water on stone. And in that quiet, you begin to realize how easily your life can be rearranged without your consent. People don't always snatch things from your hands. They wait until you are too tired to hold on. At dinners with Daniel and Claire, I noticed the shift. It started small, almost invisible. Daniel, once so eager to tell me about his work, would sit quiet, eyes on his plate. Claire filled the space, talking about decisions already made, investments, plans for the house, where they might move next. If I spoke, It was often brushed aside with a smile and a change of subject. I told myself it was nothing, that young people are simply impatient with old stories. But deep down I knew what it meant. My voice was becoming optional. I had worked my whole life to keep what little I had. A modest home, a patch of farmland I rented out, a savings account that wasn't grand but steady. They were my proof that I had not lived in vain, that my hands had built something lasting. But when you are old, those very things that give you pride become targets. A house becomes property. Savings become untapped potential. You, yourself, become paperwork waiting for a signature. And I cannot forget one conversation from years ago, spoken in a hushed tone by a neighbor whose family tore itself apart after an illness. "Hospitals change people's minds," he told me, eyes heavy with warning. "Sometimes not just their minds. Sometimes their wills." I laughed it off then, thinking it was bitterness speaking. Tonight, lying under these sterile lights, I realize it was prophecy. Claire's voice at my bedside carried that same urgency, efficiency, simplification, safety. Words polished like coins, meant to shine but heavy in the hand. Each syllable pulled me back to those dinners where my input was quietly erased. Each suggestion reminded me of Margaret's empty chair, of the silence that has only grown thicker with time. And I understood this wasn't sudden. This had been building like a slow storm, and I had ignored the clouds because I didn't want to admit they were real. As I turned my head against the stiff hospital pillow, I could almost hear that neighbor's voice again. Hospitals change people's minds. The warning rattled through me now, louder than the beeping machines, and I couldn't escape the feeling that Claire had been waiting for this very moment, when my body was weakest, to test how far she could bend me before I broke. The TV on the wall was already muted, but Claire stood to switch it off anyway, as if a dark screen were more respectful for business. The remote clicked like a lock. She rolled the little tray over my lap, its metal legs bumping the floor with the soft rattle of a shopping cart. On it she placed a fan of papers, their corners aligned like playing cards before a trick. The top sheet wore a polite title, "Temporary Authority to Act." Beneath it, a medical proxy draft, then estate simplification. The words were clean, almost harmless, like the way hospitals call the worst kind of news a finding. "Dad," she began, with the kind of smile people wear when they've practiced in a mirror, "we've all been under a lot of stress. This just makes things easier. For everyone." She tapped the signature lines with a pen. Click, click. "You don't have to read it all now, it's standard. We can fill in details later." Daniel stood near the foot of the bed. He adjusted the strap of his watch, then the blanket at the corner, then the strap again, like a man searching for smaller tasks to hide behind. I wanted him to look at me, just once, not as a problem to manage, but as the father who had carried him on my shoulders through that summer fair, who'd lifted him to see the parade above the crowd. His eyes stayed lowered, the bright hospital floor reflecting a pale oval beneath him. Claire narrated the pages like a tour guide through a place she'd walked a dozen times. "This part is just medical logistics. If you're resting or sedated, I can help direct care without bothering you." The word "bothering" pressed ice against my skin. She turned another page. "This one keeps the house flexible. If there's a need to sell for better living arrangements, we won't get tangled up." She worked the pen between her fingers. The little clicks marked time in a room that had none. "May I see?" I asked, my voice a scrape of gravel. "Of course," she said. but she didn't pass the papers until she'd drawn neat, sticky flags at each line where my name should go. Here, here, and here. We'll fill in the witness later. She leaned in, lowering her voice. It's just signatures, Edward. You can trust me. My heartbeat thudded in the monitor, a louder metronome now. The beeps made a small wave on the screen to my right, green light pulsing like a signal fire. A nurse, her badge read Maya, lifted her head at the sound and saw the tray, the papers, the pen poised over my hand like a needle. Her eyes moved from the documents to Claire, then to me. She didn't step closer, not yet, but she didn't look away. I'm tired, I said, because it was true. Fatigue was a weight over my ribs. Maybe later. Later could complicate things, Claire answered smoothly. Insurance needs to know who's authorized, and there are timing issues. You don't want delays, do you? She slipped the word delays into the air like a tiny threat, then sweetened it. Besides, this protects you. Protects me, the way one corrals a lamb protects it too. Daniel, I said. And finally he looked up. Not at me, at the papers. Do you think this is right? He swallowed. We're just trying to make it easier. For who? The question escaped me before I could soften it. The beeping kept time with the space after the words, and in that space his mouth closed again. Claire slid the pen toward my fingers. The plastic felt greasy with someone else's fingerprints. My hand trembled, whether from illness or anger I couldn't tell, and the line where my name should go seemed to breathe, opening and closing like a small wound waiting for a stitch. Maya stepped closer then. She adjusted the IV line with deliberate care. "How are we doing over here?" she asked, but her eyes never left mine. She glanced at the documents, then at my hand, and the corner of her mouth tightened, a tiny seam of disapproval stitched shut. "If you need to slow down, Mr. Harris," she said, "we go at your pace." "Thank you," Claire said brightly, answering for me. "He's fine. We're on a timeline." Maya's gaze returned to mine. She didn't speak, but her mouth formed a clear shape, soundless in the hum of machines. "Do you want help?" The words landed like a cup of water placed within reach. I felt the room tilt toward them. Help meant witnesses. Help meant process. Help meant that if this was a table, there could also be rules. My breath hitchhiked. One shallow rise, one careful fall. Claire kept talking. Liability, tax clarity, signatures now, details later. An unbroken ribbon of tidy language that pinned my choices to the mattress. "I can sign," I said, letting my voice wobble. "But I should read first." I let my hand drift to the top page, just enough to make her lean forward, just enough to slow the rhythm she'd set. The pen's click stalled in her fingers. Maya adjusted the monitor leads, an unnecessary task done slowly. Her body became a quiet wall between me and the pressure in Claire's eyes. She met my gaze again, and this time the shape of her mouth was even softer, more certain. "Do you want help? It is a terrible thing to need saving in a room you paid for with your life's work. It is a smaller, braver thing to accept it." My chest rose, fell. I let my eyes answer where my voice could not. Maya's hand hovered near the call button. Claire didn't see it. Daniel didn't see it. But the room did. The room heard the beeps settle into a steadier line, as if my heart recognized the first witness taking her seat. "Good," Claire said, mistaking my stillness for surrender. She pushed the tray closer until the papers brushed my gown. "Let's make this easy." The pen trembled at my fingertips, and somewhere under the starch and steel a new sound began to form, the faintest echo of a gavel I hadn't yet learned how to lift. I drew in a shallow breath, preparing to answer the question that had appeared on Maya's lips like a lifeline, and to do it before the next click of Claire's pen made the choice for me. There is a particular kind of wound that leaves no scar on the skin. It happens in whispers, in the little favors that are never returned, in the phone calls that begin with, "Dad, it's just until next week." I've carried more of those cuts than I ever admitted. They don't bleed, they accumulate. One by one, they make you wonder if the love you poured into your family has turned into something they now see as a reservoir to drain. It began with the ATM card. Daniel would stop by, sheepish, and ask if he could borrow it for a few days. A car repair, an overdue bill, a down payment on something that would help them get ahead. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe my son wouldn't take more than I could give. But when the card returned, the balance told its own story. I said nothing. Silence seemed easier than confrontation. Silence is always easier, until one day it becomes your prison. Claire was never sheepish. She spoke in solutions. "We'll handle this for you, Dad. We'll make sure everything is managed." She spoke as though my life were a set of tasks to delegate, a project plan that she and Daniel were hired to finish. Each time she spoke, I felt myself shrinking in my own home. The man who once decided when to plant, when to harvest, when to stand against storms, he became a man waiting for permission to breathe. That shame is a hard stone to swallow. Now, lying beneath the hum of these fluorescent lights, I saw it all with a clarity that sickness can bring. Claire was rehearsed. Her words rolled too smoothly, her arguments too polished. She had done this before, maybe in her mind, maybe in whispers with Daniel. And if she was following a script, then perhaps I could find the line that would make her stumble. "Edward," she said, tapping the paper, "this isn't complicated. Sign here, and we'll all have peace of mind." Peace of mind. That was Margaret's phrase. She had used it when she convinced me to take out life insurance, when we set aside money for Daniel's schooling. It was her phrase, not Claire's. Hearing it on her lips felt like theft. I reached for the papers with trembling hands. "Glasses?" I whispered. "Can't see without my glasses." Claire exhaled. Too sharp, too quick. For the first time, the edges of her performance showed. "Fine," she said, digging through her purse. She handed me the familiar frames, and for a moment her eyes were elsewhere, searching for the next part of her script. That was my moment. My fingers found the small, folded slip I had kept tucked near my blanket, just a few words written earlier when she thought I was sleeping. Slowly, carefully, I pushed it beneath the sheet, pressing it flat against the mattress edge, a hidden seed waiting for the right hand to find it. The paper burned hot against my skin, though the words were few. A cry disguised as preparation. When I slid the glasses onto my nose, the room came into focus again. Claire was watching me, pen poised, Daniel still quiet as a statue at the foot of the bed. To them, nothing had changed. To me, everything had. "Better?" Claire asked, smiling her mirror smile. "Better," I said softly, though not for the reason she thought. And behind my answer, a vow sharpened in silence. This courtroom had just received its first piece of evidence. Hospitals have their own rhythm, a quiet music of footsteps, carts rolling down linoleum, the whisper of curtains sliding open and shut. If you lie still long enough, you begin to tell the players apart by sound alone. Nurses walk with brisk certainty. Social workers drift in with softer steps, carrying questions instead of syringes. And the janitors, God bless them, move steady and unhurried, bearing witness without anyone noticing. Claire never noticed. She was too busy controlling the stage, her voice cutting through the room as if she alone wrote the script. But I noticed every pair of eyes that flicked toward my bed, every pause when they caught the edge of her tone. The ICU wasn't empty. It was full of quiet witnesses, and in a courtroom, witnesses are everything. Maya lingered longer than she needed when adjusting the IV line. She leaned down, her voice as soft as the hiss of oxygen. "Do you need me to get someone?" she asked, words disguised as routine care. I met her gaze, then blinked twice, our clumsy code. She nodded, as if tucking the message into her pocket. Later, Angela, the social worker, appeared with her clipboard. She asked the usual questions: pain levels, family support, discharge planning, but her pen slowed when Claire interrupted to answer for me. Angela tilted her head, watching me instead of the paper. I whispered, "Capacity test." Independent. The word almost dissolved in my throat, but she heard it. Her lips pressed together, not in doubt, but in recognition. She wrote nothing, but her silence was a promise. Even the janitor, pushing his mop in wide arcs, glanced up when Claire raised her voice about timelines and insurance complications. He didn't linger, but I saw the way his brow furrowed, how his pace slowed. Ordinary people unnoticed, storing fragments in their memory. I understood then. This room was already gathering testimony. I needed one more step. When Maya returned with my evening medication, I asked for the phone. "Just a moment," I said, pretending to fumble with the call button. Claire dismissed it as weakness, waving her hand. Maya placed the phone in my palm, the weight of it both terrifying and liberating. My fingers shook so violently I thought I would drop it. Still, I typed, haltingly, each letter a battle against my trembling hand. "Emergency. Bedside. Bring the folder." I hit send. The words flew out like a bird released, small but alive. Claire was still speaking, something about making things easier if we act now. But I hardly heard her. For the first time since she had rolled that tray of papers across my lap, I felt the faintest crack in her control. My chest rose against the wires. The beeping machine kept its rhythm, but beneath it, I heard something else. My own heartbeat. No longer afraid. No longer just prey. Help was on its way. And though I was trapped in bed, I had just summoned my first witness to the stand. When the time came, I let my body sag heavier against the bed, my voice thin as though I had run out of air. Playing weak is not difficult when weakness already lives in your bones. I asked questions slowly, each one wrapped in a fog of hesitation. What does this page mean again?" My hand trembled over the title as if I couldn't comprehend the words. Claire brightened. She mistook my slowness for surrender, her voice lifting like a teacher guiding a child through his letters. "This one," she explained, "just allows us to help you make decisions when you're not up to it. Nothing complicated." Her smile was practiced, but her eyes were sharp, calculating. She tapped the next page. This ensures we can manage the property quickly without legal tangles. It's just efficiency." "Manage the property?" I whispered. "What property?" "The house," she said simply, almost carelessly. "If we need to sell, we can do it without delay. That way, you'll have better care options." "A retirement community, perhaps. Somewhere more suitable." The word stung like salt on an open wound. More suitable. The house where Margaret and I raised Daniel, where every corner holds laughter and loss, reduced to an entry on a sales ledger. My throat burned, but I forced my face to remain blank, my eyelids heavy as though I barely understood. "And where would I live?" I asked, my voice cracking under the strain of keeping it steady. Her smile faltered just for a second. "We'd figure it out," she replied quickly, too quickly. She glanced at Daniel, searching for support, but he kept his eyes low, his silence deeper than ever. In that silence, her words hung, naked and brittle. I turned the pen in my hand as if it were too heavy for me. I looked at her, let the pause linger, then spoke the words I had been saving, soft but clear. "Then let's put that in writing." Her breath caught, just a fraction of a second, but I saw it. The misstep, the break in her smooth performance. She hadn't expected resistance from a dying man. She hadn't expected that I could still turn the table. The room fell still. The machine's steady beeps filled the gap between us. My chest rose thin and uneven, but inside I felt something stronger than air. I had shifted the weight, if only an inch. Claire pressed her lips together, searching for her next line. And in that moment, with the faintest trace of a smile hidden beneath my exhaustion, I knew I had just asked the first real question in this trial. The courtroom was waking. Claire slid the paper closer, aligning it neatly over the tray across my lap. Her hand rested on my wrist, the pen warm between my fingers, guiding me as though I were already gone. "Here, Dad," she coaxed softly. "Just a quick signature. Then you can rest." I let the pen touch the paper, my hand trembling as though I couldn't control it. The black ink bled forward, not across the line where she wanted, but jagged, wandering into the white space, a smear more than a name, proof not of weakness, but of resistance. I heard her inhale sharply, saw the flicker in her eyes as she realized the signature was ruined. At that very moment my pulse jumped. The monitor beside me erupted into a sudden alarm, its sharp rhythm filling the room. Maya appeared instantly, her hands moving with precision as she checked the wires, the screen, then my face. "What's happening here?" she asked, her tone calm but firm. "He's confused," Claire said quickly, her voice rising too high, too fast. "He doesn't understand what he's signing. He's not competent right now." The words tumbled out, desperate, louder than they should have been. She reached to snatch the paper back, but Maya's hand was already there, steady, stopping her with nothing more than a look. Daniel shifted uneasily at the foot of the bed, his silence now heavy with shame. I turned my head just enough to see him. "I know what I'm doing," I rasped, the effort grinding against my chest. My ruined scrawl sat on the page like evidence of a struggle, the ink still glistening under the lights. Maya adjusted the monitor again, buying me precious seconds. "Mr. Harris," she said clearly, "do you want to continue this now?" "Yes," I answered, holding her eyes. but not with her words in my mouth. Claire opened her mouth to argue, but the door behind her clicked open. Footsteps entered, deliberate and measured, the sound of leather soles on tile. A man in a dark suit, hair silver at the temples, carried a black briefcase tucked neatly at his side. His presence shifted the air in the room. "Sorry I'm late," he said, his voice steady, unhurried. "Edward, I came as soon as I got your message." Claire turned, color draining from her face. Who are you?" He placed the briefcase on the windowsill and opened it with a sharp snap. "His attorney," he said, pulling out a folder thick with documents. He glanced at the tray, the papers spread there, the ruined signature like a wound across the page. "And I believe I've arrived just in time." The room held its breath. For the first time I felt the weight tilt completely. No longer a hospital room, no longer just an ICU. It was a courtroom now, and the judge had finally entered. The briefcase opened like a chest of iron, its contents sharp and orderly against the pale light of the ICU. My lawyer, Mr. Jennings, spoke with the kind of authority that does not need volume to be heard. "Before we continue," he said, sliding the tray aside, "I'd like to establish a few things." Claire stiffened. "This isn't the time. He's too sick to handle this." Jennings didn't even look at her. Instead, he turned toward Maya and Angela, who had quietly stepped closer, drawn by the rising tide of voices. "Ladies, can you confirm that Mr. Harris has been communicating clearly?" he asked. Maya's reply was immediate. "He's coherent. He's made specific requests. He understands what's happening." Angela nodded, her pen already poised above her clipboard. "He asked for independent capacity testing earlier. I wrote it down." Claire's voice sharpened. "He's confused. You can't take his words at face value." As if summoned, Dr. Patel, the attending physician, entered with the steady gait of someone who lived in fluorescent light. Jennings gestured toward him. "Doctor, could you ask my client a few questions, in simple terms?" Dr. Patel moved to my bedside. His eyes were kind, his voice plain. "Mr. Harris, can you tell me your name?" "Edward Harris," I answered, my breath steady. "And where are you right now?" "In the ICU at St. Matthew's Hospital." He leaned slightly closer. "And do you understand what your daughter-in-law has asked you to sign?" "Yes," I said, forcing the strength into each syllable. "Papers to give her control. Papers to sell my home." The doctor straightened, scribbling on his chart. "He is competent. His memory, orientation, and understanding are intact." Jennings snapped the briefcase shut, the sound sharp as a gavel strike. He pulled out a folder marked with my name, laying it open on the tray. "We have prior estate documents, bank statements, and clear instructions written months ago. These attempts to override them are irregular at best." Claire's face tightened, but she stayed silent. Jennings turned to her, eyes steady. "Mrs. Harris, who drafted these papers? Where did they come from?" The room fell quiet, except for the steady beep of the heart monitor. Maya's hand stilled on the IV pole. Angela's pen hovered above the paper, waiting. Daniel shifted, but said nothing. The fluorescent light hummed above us all, brighter than before, exposing everything. Jennings repeated the question, slower this time, each word deliberate. "Who drafted these papers?" Claire's lips parted, but no words came. Her silence was louder than any answer. And in that silence, the ICU ceased to be a room of machines and became, unmistakably, a courtroom waiting for her testimony. The question lingered in the air, heavy, undeniable, and all eyes turned to her, waiting. Jennings spread the papers across the tray with the precision of a man laying evidence on a bench. "Let's treat this properly," he said, his voice calm but edged with iron. "Exhibit A, documents placed before my client while under medical care. No counsel, no witnesses, pressured signatures. Unacceptable." Maya stepped closer, folding her arms. He was being urged to sign while alarms went off. I asked if he wanted to slow down. He blinked at me. Twice. He knew what he wanted. Angela lifted her clipboard, her notes already prepared. He requested an independent capacity test. I wrote it down before anyone else entered. His words were his own, not confused, not coerced. Jennings nodded, sliding a second page forward. Exhibit B. Language about property transfer with no safeguards, no provision for Mr. Harris's residence. He turned toward Claire. "You call this efficiency. I call it exploitation." From the back of the room, the janitor cleared his throat, hesitant. "I don't mean to intrude," he said softly, "but I heard her telling him it was urgent, pressing him. Didn't sound right." Jennings smiled faintly. "Exhibit C, an unbiased witness, confirming undue pressure." He reached into his briefcase once more, producing my phone. "Exhibit D." He pressed play. The room filled with Claire's voice, captured in shaky audio. "If we sell the house quickly, we can cover everything. Better now than later. Just sign." Her own words hung heavy, undeniable. Claire's face drained of color. Jennings let the silence sit like a verdict. Then he turned to Daniel. "Would you like to explain this, son?" Daniel's throat moved as though swallowing stones. We just wanted to help." I raised my head, my voice weaker than I wished but steadier than he deserved. "Help who, Daniel? Me? Or yourselves?" He opened his mouth, but no answer came. The weight of the room pressed down, every eye fixed on him. The machines hummed, the lights buzzed, and still the silence grew until it was louder than any protest could have been. For the first time in years, I saw my son stripped bare, not of wealth, not of opportunity, but of excuses. And in that hollow pause, the courtroom held him accountable, even if he could not yet speak the truth. Jennings reached into his case once more, slower this time, as though savoring the moment. "Exhibit E," he said, pulling out a thick envelope with my name written in Margaret's familiar hand. He placed it gently on the tray, then laid a folder beside it. "This is the living trust your wife established with you years ago. Edward, would you like me to explain?" I nodded, my throat tight. He opened the folder. "The home is secured. It cannot be sold without conditions clearly met. You are granted life estate, which means no one can remove you or force a sale while you live. A successor trustee is named, someone outside this room. Funds are allocated for your grandchildren's education. The rest remains under your control until the end." The words washed over me like cool water after years in the sun. Margaret had insisted, her voice echoing from memory. "We need to prepare, Edward. If anyone pressures you when you're weak, the house must stand for you." I had signed the papers back then to ease her worry, never realizing they would one day save me from my own blood. Claire's face cracked. The confidence that carried her through hours of speeches drained all at once. Her lips trembled, but no words came. She stared at the folder as though it were a mirror, reflecting back her own defeat. Daniel shifted beside her, his silence louder than shouting. He had not known. I could see it in his eyes. Shock, shame, confusion all tangled together. He looked like a boy again, caught in something larger than he could handle. Jennings continued, his tone calm but final. This trust is binding. The documents you attempted to push have no power here. What you sought to erase has already been safeguarded years ago. I lowered my gaze to the folder, my heart pounding in rhythm with the monitor beside me. Margaret's foresight had reached into this room, into this trial, saving me when I could not save myself. For the first time since she passed, I felt her hand on my shoulder. She had built the fortress that kept me standing, even as I lay weak in this bed. Jennings rested his palm over the envelope. "Edward, your wife left you this letter. She asked it be opened only when necessary. I believe now is that time." The room went silent, heavy with anticipation. Even the machines seemed to hush, their steady beeping distant against the weight of that sealed envelope. Claire stared at it as though it might open her fate. Daniel's eyes flickered, searching for an escape that did not exist. The letter sat on the tray, untouched, glowing under the harsh fluorescent light. Margaret's handwriting, curved and steady, waited like a voice ready to rise from the grave. And in that silence I felt the whole room lean forward, waiting to hear her verdict. My fingers shook as Jennings placed the envelope in my hands. The paper was soft with age, worn at the edges, but Margaret's handwriting was as steady as the day she'd written it. I slid my thumb under the seal, and for a moment I hesitated, as if opening it might break her silence forever. Then I pulled, and the flap gave way with a sigh. Inside was a single page. Her words, written in blue ink, carried the weight of a lifetime. I read them once silently, and then again aloud, my voice quivering. "Edward, if you are reading this, it means time has weakened your body but not your spirit. Remember what I told you when we set up the trust. If anyone ever rushes you when you are weakest, slow them down with light. Truth is your weapon. Patience is your defense. Do not let fear write your story. Stand tall, even from your bed, and know that my love is still your shield." The words pierced me deeper than any pain in my chest. My vision blurred, but not from sickness. Tears slid into the wrinkles at the corners of my eyes, and I pressed the letter to my heart as though she were standing beside me once more. I could almost hear her laugh, the way it softened every hard edge of my life. Even in death, Margaret had found a way to protect me. She had left me her strength, wrapped in ink and paper. The room was silent, except for the sound of my breath breaking. Claire looked away, her face pale, while Daniel swallowed hard, his eyes glistening with something he could not speak. For a moment, I was no longer a patient surrounded by machines. I was a husband, still bound by a promise stronger than betrayal. I drew in a ragged breath. "I want to change my medical proxy," I said, my voice steadier now. "Effective immediately. Someone I can trust." I named a niece who had always stood by me, her devotion quiet but constant. Angela, the social worker, stepped forward with the necessary forms, and Maya and Dr. Patel bore witness as my trembling hand scrawled across the page. This time, the signature was messy but deliberate. Mine. Jennings took the form, nodding firmly. "It's done." The patient advocate, who had entered silently during the reading, spoke now. "Given the circumstances, I recommend a temporary no-contact order with Mrs. Harris until we complete a full review. This will protect Mr. Harris and preserve the integrity of his care." Claire gasped, her composure breaking. "You can't do that!" But the advocate's tone was final. "It is already in motion." The machines beeped steadily, almost calmly now, as if echoing Margaret's words back to me. Light, truth, patience. I clutched her letter, my shield, and for the first time in days, I felt safe enough to breathe without fear. The battle was not finished, but the walls had been raised, and the courtroom had chosen its side. 2 guards appeared at the door, summoned not by me, but by the advocate's quiet authority. Their steps were heavy, their faces expressionless. Claire's voice rose, sharp and brittle, filling the sterile hallway as they guided her out. "This is insane! I was trying to help! You'll regret this!" Her words trailed off as the doors swung closed behind her, leaving only the hum of the machines and the thin, sudden quiet of her absence. The air felt different without her. The weight in the room lifted, as though someone had opened a window, though the glass panes remained shut. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. My chest ached, but for the first time it was not from fear. Daniel stood frozen near the wall, his face pale, his hands limp at his sides. He looked like a man half-emptied, his silence no longer a weapon but a burden. I searched his eyes looking for my son, the boy who once clung to my hand at county fairs, who once asked me to read stories until he fell asleep. What I found instead was shame so thick it held him still. Jennings closed the folder with a decisive snap. "Your accounts are protected, Edward," he said. "We've set safeguards with the bank, and your trust is intact. No one will touch it without due process." His calm voice grounded me, pulling me back from the edge of exhaustion. He gathered the papers, each one now transformed from threat to evidence. Maya adjusted the blanket at my chest, her touch gentle. "You should rest now," she said, and for once I obeyed. I closed my eyes. The machines kept their rhythm, a lullaby of beeps and hums, and I slipped into a sleep that felt deeper than any I had known in weeks. Sleep without fear is the sweetest gift. When I woke, the room was bathed in morning light. It cut through the blinds in pale stripes, painting the floor in quiet lines. Jennings was gone. The staff changed for the day shift, but the stillness remained. I turned my head slowly, and there he was, Daniel, standing alone at the foot of the bed. His eyes were red as though the night had pressed hard on him. He said nothing at first, only held my gaze, and for a fleeting moment I saw the boy he once was. His shoulders sagged, his lips parted, but no words came. There was something in his face I could not yet read. Remorse, fear, maybe both. The morning sun touched us both, casting long shadows between father and son. And in that fragile silence I wondered, had he returned as a man ready to make amends, or was this simply another mask waiting to be revealed? The morning silence stretched until Daniel broke it. His voice was rough, uncertain, as if every word had to climb a hill before leaving his mouth. "Dad, I didn't mean for it to go that far." He gripped the rail at the foot of the bed, knuckles whitening. Claire. She pushes. She said it was the only way. The bills, the debt. It's crushing us. I thought if we could manage things differently, it would fix everything. I studied him, my son, the man I raised with calloused hands and long days of labor. He looked smaller now, not in body, but in spirit. I could see the boy who once hid behind my legs when strangers spoke, the boy who cried when his kite tore against the wind. Somewhere between then and now, fear had carved him hollow, and yet the choices were still his. "You let her speak for you," I said quietly, "and silence can wound deeper than words." My voice cracked, but I pressed on. "I wasn't just your father. I was your example. If this is what you've learned, then I failed somewhere." His eyes filled, not with the pride of defense, but with the sting of truth. "I was scared, Dad. Scared of losing everything. Scared of looking weak. She made it sound like strength." He lowered his head, shame bending him forward. I let the silence rest between us, heavy but alive. My anger was real, but it was layered with grief. What good was revenge when what I wanted, what I still wanted, was my son back? "Daniel," I said, my voice steadier now, "strength isn't found in stealing from the weak. It isn't in signatures taken under pressure. Real strength is standing even when you're afraid and protecting those who depend on you. You forgot that. Maybe you forgot me." He nodded, eyes fixed on the floor. "I'm not going to shut the door forever," I continued, "but I won't hand you the keys either. If you want to be my son again, not just in blood but in honor, you must earn the right to have a key. Show me you can carry responsibility, not just need." The room was quiet. He nodded again, slower this time, a flicker of resolve behind the shame. I didn't know if it would last, but it was something. A seed, perhaps. I reached for the phone, my hand steadier than yesterday. With Maya's help, I dialed the school where my grandson was enrolled. "Yes," I told the secretary when she answered. "I'd like to set up a college fund meeting. It's time." As I hung up, I caught Daniel's eyes. He looked startled, then softened. He understood. My legacy would not be squandered on greed. It would flow forward to the innocent. The courtroom had given its sentence. My verdict was hope, not for him alone, but for the generation after him. The days that followed moved more gently, like the hush after a storm. Claire did not return. The no-contact order held her at bay. Daniel visited in quieter hours, his words fewer but heavier, as though each one was weighed before leaving his mouth. I did not rush him. The wounds between us would not close in a day, but they no longer bled in silence. Before I was discharged, I asked Jennings to make one more arrangement. Together, we donated to the hospital fund, not in my name, but in Maya's. Her vigilance, her unspoken questions, had shifted everything when I was too weak to speak for myself. To honor her was to honor the truth. She wept quietly when she found out, and in that moment I realized not all battles are fought alone. Sometimes strength is borrowed, shared, multiplied. The tray across my lap was cleared away. The papers were gone, the pen no longer pressed into my hand. It was just a tray again, holding a cup of water, a folded napkin, a small meal. The courtroom had dissolved, but the verdict remained etched in the walls of my memory. I had not been conquered. I had not surrendered my name. In the evenings, as the light slanted through the blinds, I held Margaret's letter close. I could almost feel her presence in the room, the warmth of her love woven into every sentence. She had seen ahead farther than I ever could, and she had left me more than protection. She had left me the courage to stand even when I was flat on my back. One afternoon, I asked the nurse for a recorder. My voice was thin, but steady as I spoke into it, a message for my grandchildren. If anyone turns your pain into a deal, I told them, do not sign away your soul. Do not let fear write your story. Stand in the light, even when it flickers. And remember, your worth is not a line on a page. I ended the recording, leaning back into the pillows, my chest heavy but no longer burdened. For the first time in a long while, I felt whole. The machines ticked softly beside me, but I was no longer defined by their rhythm. I was defined by the choice I had made, to fight, to endure, to judge. I didn't win a lawsuit. I didn't need one. What I won was far greater. I won myself back. And in that victory, Claire and Daniel lost everything they came for.